Hello and welcome to Release Readiness Live for Developers. My name is Alba Rivas. I am a developer advocate here at Salesforce, and I am going to be your MC for this session. Today, I have a group of amazing product managers and developer advocates with me, and they are going to present all these release new features for developers for you, and they are going to answer all your questions. This session is interactive. We're here to help you. Do you have a question about Winter 22 for us? Make sure to ask us on Twitter, and our fleet of experts will be happy to answer you. Use in your questions the hashtag Salesforce Live. During the session, we will make some forward-looking announcements. Remember to make your purchasing decisions based on the features that are currently generally available. Great, so this is the content that we are going to cover today. First, we will have Sue Berry, Senior Director of Product Management for Mobile Platform, talk about mobile Lwc and mobile SDK. Next, Stefan Chandler Garcia, another developer advocate in my team, will delight us talking about Lightning Web Components enhancements. I will continue talking about Apex new features, and finally, Aditya Nagtopali, another developer advocate in the India team, will talk about our open source applications updates. So that's all from me for now. Now let's hear Sue talk about mobile enhancements for Winter 22.
Thanks, Alba. Hi, everyone. I'm Sue Berry. I'm a product manager in Salesforce Mobile Platform. And today I'll show you the latest features for developers for mobile. Let's take a look. Mobile platform experience is about simplifying the experience for all types of users building on mobile platform. We provide a unified developer experience for our customers and partners. And we make it easier, not just for developers, but for all users to be successful when building for mobile. Our features include the Salesforce mobile app emulator builds, and they allow developers to test and debug their Lightning Web components alongside other components in a Lightning application. Developers can also link up their Chrome and Safari dev tools for debugging purposes. And in addition, you can now do automated testing for mobile by linking up your testing suite or Salesforce's UI test automation to these virtual device builds. For Lightning Web Component local development, developers can preview for mobile in addition to desktop browser, and those previews are instant. When getting started building for mobile, you should always start with our best practices and guidelines. But just in case you're skipping past these docs, we have validators in VS Code to provide programmatic guidance for components, CSS, and offline ability for your Lightning Web components. Let's take a look at the demo of our latest validators. Okay, here I am in VS Code. I have created a Lightning Web component, and I've added an @wire to grab data directly from Salesforce. Interesting, I'm seeing a warning here that's being displayed. The warning states that the wire adapter get record alternative is not supported offline or when I'm using no network connectivity. Okay, I need to figure out what to do about this. I can look at the different quick fix options. It says I can disable for this line for the entire file, or I can also show the documentation to better understand what my options are. I've looked at the documentation and I'll use a different @wire for now, one called get record. Okay, the warning goes away, so it looks like I am all good there and I can continue building my Lightning Web component. Now that I have my data, I want to add a purchase option to my bicycle products. I see there's a base component called click to dial. I'm going to try that one out. This seems like something pretty useful to allow someone to call in for a bike purchase. Uh-oh, I see another warning. It says, Lightning Click to Dial is known to have issues on mobile devices. Consider using a replacement or create a custom component to use instead. Okay, I'll do that. For now, I'll just leave that alone and I'll stick with digital options for bike purchases. Okay, so now I'm going to add a Lightning button base component and I'm going to label it Buy Now. Good, there are no warnings, so we're all good there. I save my changes. And the nice thing about mobile previews is that it instantly refreshes. I can see the Buy Now button and then I can continue with my development. Now I'll add an icon to allow users to save the bike as a wishlist item. And I'm receiving another warning. Okay, clickable buttons and images should have a label to provide more clarity for mobile users. Okay, that makes sense to me. I'll add a label for my icon, and the warning disappears. That's great. So now up to this point, I've been previewing in mobile browser in the simulator. So recently we've added the ability to download and view in a mobile test app. So let's preview my component locally. I'll choose iOS simulator. It then searches through all the simulators available, and I select iPhone 12. Now I'll select the LWC test app instead of the mobile browser. This launches the test app in my simulator so I can preview my component. I'm previewing the same component as before, but now it's within an actual mobile app on the simulator. I swipe up and I can see the actual standalone application, and I can go back into it. That's awesome. We give you so many choices to preview for mobile. Now, let's go back to the slides and view the roadmap. Over the next few releases, we'll continue to enhance our programmatic validation. And we're also bringing Nimbus to Lightning Web Components. Nimbus is all about bringing native device capabilities to LWC. We'll also provide a simplified developer experience around Nimbus to VS Code and Lightning Web Components. We're also working with UI test automation, and that's to bring mobile app testing to that framework. As you can see, there are a lot of exciting features headed your way. So now let's talk about the Salesforce Mobile Sdk. The Salesforce Mobile Sdk provides a fully custom mobile experience on top of Salesforce. And many of our customers are already taking advantage of this SDK. There are over 3 million active users, and over 2,600 active apps have already been created by our customers so far. And the SDK also powers the mobile apps at Salesforce, including the Salesforce mobile app, Salesforce Field Service, Trailhead Go, and more. So whether you're building apps for iOS, Android, or cross-platform, the mobile SDK simplifies your custom mobile app building experience. It provides full flexibility to customize every pixel, every flow, every feature. The ability to work with apps offline, a simplified authentication to your Salesforce environment, and the ability to combine Salesforce functionality with other integrations as needed. In Mobile SDK 9.0, we added support for multiple windows for iPadOS. Enabling this feature in your application allows your end users to be more productive. As an example, an end user can work on 2 different records simultaneously and then copy and paste from one window to the other. The multitasking benefits are endless. With Mobile SDK 9.1, developers can take their Mobile SDK apps to Mac. Yes, Mac. Even Macs powered by M1. M1 is the new ARM-based chip powering the latest MacBooks. We've added Mac support and multiple windows to our REST API Explorer sample and the Mobile Sync Explorer Swift template. This means that you can easily use these samples to view how Mobile SDK apps that access Salesforce data and run offline behave on all the existing new form factors: iPhone, iPad, Intel Mac, and Macs with M1. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the demo. All right, I'm currently on my MacBook, and I'm going to run the Mobile Sync Explorer Swift template. It will kick off and ask me about my app name, my package name, and the organization. As the template runs, it creates the application with all the Mobile SDK libraries. It launches Xcode, and you can see it's already selected for iPad, but I can also select Mac. All right, let's first take a look at my app running on iPad. So I have my iPad here. I can see my contact list. And the first thing I'm going to do is put it in airplane mode so the app runs fully offline. Now back in the app, I drag the contact over to the right-hand side, and it automatically creates that second window. I view the list on the left and the details on the right. And now I'll edit one of those details, the phone number, and save the changes. We just saw how easy this is on iPad. Now let's take a look at the same app running on Mac. I have the same contact list in my view, and just like on iPad, I'll turn off Wi-Fi on my Mac so the app runs completely offline. Now on my iPad, I drag that contact to create the second window. Here, I select the contact and click Open a new window. I can see the details in the new window, and I can still edit the phone number even while offline. I'll make that change and save my changes. And I can see that there's an item that still needs to be synced, which is great. All right, let's go back to the slides and look at the roadmap for Mobile SDK. All right, what's coming next for Mobile SDK? Well, if you've heard of Briefcase and the ability for admins to take specific records and tag them to work offline, well, that's great because Mobile SDK is going to integrate with Briefcase and provide that as another sync target. So as a developer, you'll be able to specify a specific Briefcase to sync with and allow your admins to specify the records. We'll also be integrating more Lightning functionality into Mobile SDK so that developers can leverage the power of Lightning and keep the mobile features and capabilities end users expect, including offline usage. Those are some of the great new features from mobile for developers in Winter 22. Now I'll turn it over to Stefan to learn more about what's new with Lightning.
Thank you, Sue, for that great overview of mobile enhancements. Hello, everyone. I'm Stefan Chandler Garcia, a developer advocate here at Salesforce. I'm really excited to be sharing with you some new updates to Lightning Web Components. We're going to start out with a very hot topic and a favorite of mine, cookie consent. We're glad to announce that we now have capability inside of Lightning Web Components to access and modify cookie consent in Experience Cloud. This makes it much easier for you to verify or gather cookie consent from your users. There is a new user cookie consent module that you can access that allows you to import two methods for managing cookies. The first of those is the set cookie consent method. It allows you to pass in an array of the user's preferences and update them. The second is the is category allowed for current consent method, which does exactly what it says it does. It gets the status of the category and returns it to your component. When you go to use the methods, you can see that the structure of our consent property just takes the name of the category and matches it with the value. Then, when we want to update the preference, we can just pass the consent object into the set cookie consent method. Now, let's go ahead and demo how these features work. We're going to create a Lightning Web Component for Experience Cloud that lets you toggle on and off your cookie consent. Inside of our cookie consent Lightning Web Component, we are going to first import the set cookie consent and then import the category allowed for current consent methods. They are going to be imported from Lightning / the user consent module. We can now use these to modify the consent status of a user and check the consent status of a user. Then in the file, we're going to create a consent property that we're going to track. This will store our preferences. We're going to store the name of the preference and then go to get the value using the isCategoryAllowed method and just pass in the label. This will return a Boolean that we can use to track the preference. We're going to do the same for marketing and pass in the label here. Then we are going to do the same again for statistics. And so what we're doing here is looking at 3 specific categories of consent that we can then use to track and modify the preferences based on these categories. Next, let's go ahead and register the connected callback into this component. And in that connected callback, let's log the consent object so that we can see what the data structure looks like in the browser and make sure that that data is coming through. Let's go ahead and save and deploy this into the org. But before we look at the component, let's take a look at the HTML file here. You can see here that we have just a basic modal pop-up that we can use to track consent. We have 3 toggles that match our consent categories that just call back to the JavaScript and modify them. We'll write that next, but first, let's jump into Experience Cloud to check this out. Here, we have our brand new Lightning Web Runtime Experience Cloud page with our component displayed. Let's go ahead and refresh the page and see what comes through. And there you go. You can see it in the console that it has printed our values. We have the preference category, the marketing category, the statistics category, all set to false. So let's go ahead and wire up these toggles so that we can modify the preferences. To do this, let's go ahead and go back into our JavaScript file, and we're going to create a change consent value method for our toggles. We're going to start out by creating a constant for the cookie consent category. We're going to just access the name through the event by typing in event.currentTarget.dataset.category. That is where we're storing the name of the category on the toggle. Next, we are going to create a constant for storing the value of the checkbox so that we can update it to the new value. Next, let's log the change in the console so that we can see it in action. We will just use a template literal here to pass in the name of the category and the value it is being changed to. Then we can actually modify the value of the consent object. We can just say this.consent square bracket and pass in the name of the category. This will allow us to just assign the value to the category. Lastly, all we need to do is pass in the consent object into the setCookieConsent method. That will take the value that has been updated and go and update the cookie preference for the user. So let's go ahead and save and deploy these changes and check them out in the org. Back in the Experience Cloud site, we can toggle on all of the cookie settings, and then when we refresh the page, you can see that they have been stored. This makes it super easy to manage consent right from a Lightning Web component. Now, on to our next feature. I'm very excited to tell you that you can now view your Lightning Web Component dependencies right from setup. It will help you uncover which components your bundles rely on. You can access dependencies right inside of setup, where there is a new UI for browsing the component relationships. So let's go ahead and pop into our org and check out one of the components. Here in setup, we're going to search for Lightning in the quick find. Down at the bottom of the list, we're going to select Lightning components. This will show us all of the components in our org. So let's go ahead and check out the Menu Manager component. What's cool about this is that the component is from a managed package. We can browse any child components and view any related metadata items to those components. For example, here you can see a number of Apex and object dependencies. This really helps when auditing component use across your Salesforce org. I hope that you're all as excited as I am about these new features. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them at the end of the session. Next, I'll pass over to my colleague, Alba.
Thank you, Stefan, for talking about those great improvements. Now it's my turn to talk about Apex enhancements. Let's start. There are 3 amazing Apex features that I would like to demo for you today. Let's start with the value of method in the enum class. This method lets you convert a string to a num constant in a single line. Let's go to VS Code to take a look at a demo. Before Winter 22, to get an enum constant value from string, you had to iterate through all the values, searching for a matching name. For instance, you could create a map linking string and enum constants to do the lookup against. Now, working with enum is much easier because you can simply use enum.valueOf and obtain the constant value in a single line of code. Here I have some debug statements. Let's run this code in Execute Anonymous and take a look at the result. There you have it, the same result with just one line of code. Much easier, right? The second feature I want to demo today is the ability to call invocable actions from Apex. Invocable actions are automated actions that can be invoked from different entry points in Salesforce, such as the REST API, Flow, or Process Builder. They are one of the best tools in Salesforce to quickly get things done. From Winter 22, you will be able to easily invoke them in Apex. Bear in mind this feature is in developer preview. You will have to activate it on your Scratch orgs by including the call IA from Apex feature in the Scratch org configuration file, as I'm doing here. Great. So first, we will try this feature calling a standard invocable actions. But what is a standard action? Every button and link in Salesforce can be considered a standard action. You can take a look at the available standard actions in the Actions Developer Guide. In this first example, we will invoke the chatter post standard action. To call the action, we first instantiate it using the create standard action method from the new Invocable Action Apex class. Then we set the invocation parameters. And finally, we invoke it calling the invoke method. The method returns a list of invocable action results. You can explore that list to find out if the operation succeeded or failed, retrieve the output of the operation, and more. I will execute the method again and navigate to the org to see the result. And there it is, a chatter post spreading the love for our new developer website. This feature is not restricted to standard invocable actions. You can call custom invocable actions too. Custom invocable actions are defined in Apex. You specify the inputs, the outputs, and what the method will do. Here, I have a custom invocable action that receives a mascot name as a parameter. The action returns a string building a sentence. Now we can instantiate the action with create custom action, set the expected mascot parameter, and invoke it. Let's execute it with execute anonymous and take a look at the result. Voila, it seems that Cody also loves our new developer website. Take a look at all the methods available for the new invocable action result, and invocable action error classes on the release notes. Finally, let's go into our third demo. Functions are scheduled to become generally available in Winter 22 release. As part of this release, we have created some Apex classes and interfaces to help you to easily write Apex tests for functions. Let's take a look at some examples. For the examples, we will use an arbitrary function just to illustrate how testing works. In fact, the code that we use here doesn't matter, as a mock will be responding during test execution rather than the underlying function. This means that to test the invocation of a function, you will have to provide a mock implementation for it. The mock class needs to implement the new functions.function invoke mock interface and specify the mock response sent to the respond method when the Apex runtime calls the function. By using the create success response and create error response methods in the mock class, you can emulate the success or failure of the function invocation. In this example mock, by default, we emulate a successful response. However, if the throw error variable is set to true, then we emulate an error. Let's take a look at the method in the sample function call class that invokes our function synchronously. First, we invoke the function, and then we call the post to chatter method. This method posts a message to chatter indicating if the function executed successfully or if an error happened. Let's go now to the test class. In this first test, we test the call function synchronously method. We instruct the Apex runtime to send the fake response by calling test.setMock. The first argument to test.setMock is the functions.functionInvoke class, and the second argument is a new instance of your mock. When the test.setMock method is called, the real function is not actually invoked. Instead, the mock response that you specified in your mock respond method is received. In this case, we indicated the mock to emulate a successful invocation. So, a success chatter post should have been created. Let's execute the test and see the result. Great, so the test passes as expected. The method creates a success chatter post as we emulated a successful function execution. In the case of invoking a function asynchronously, you will have to specify a callback to process the function output, as seen in this second example. The sample function callback reuses the post to chatter method shown before. We can test the async function invocation exactly in the same way that we did for the synchronous one. In this second example, we will force the error by setting the throw error variable to true in the mock. That way, the function mock will emulate an error. Then we call the function asynchronously, and finally, we check that the error chatter post has been created. Let's execute this test too. And there we have it. The error chatter post has been successfully created, indicating there was an error in the function invocation, the one that we emulated. Now you have all the required tooling to start writing functions that are scheduled to become generally available in this release. Take a look at the function recipes sample app on our Trailhead apps repo to know more. In this release, we also have 2 Apex-related pilots. With the user mode database operations pilot, you will be able to specify user mode access for database operations in Apex. This is for queries, search, and DML. This provides a very direct way of enforcing the current user's CRUD, FLS, and sharing permissions on the specific operations. With the data within Apex pilot, the MuleSoft language for transforming data, you will be able to easily read and parse data from one format, transform it, and write it out as a different format from Apex. For example, you will be able to convert Apex objects to a CSV string, XML, or JSON, among others. To know more about these 2 pilots, watch the Dreamforce session Develop Enterprise Applications with Apex. And if you want to become part of those pilots, make sure to ask your Salesforce account executive. Finally, if you want to check the code for today's examples, take a look at this GitHub repo in which I have uploaded all the sample code. That's all from me. Now let's dig into our next section and hear Aditya talk about the updates to our open source apps.
Thank you, Alba. Hi, everyone. My name is Aditya, and I'm a developer advocate at Salesforce. Open source apps are a great way for you to explore new features, learn best practices, and of course, get inspired about what you can build on the platform. Today, I'm going to talk about a couple of new open source apps that we launched, and also about how we've made it easier for you to explore all the open source apps that we have. With the launch of the new developer website, all the apps from our frequently used sample gallery and all the other open source apps we had in different repos now have a new home. We call it Code Samples and SDKs. You can access it from the Build tab on the website. The sample gallery, as you know, only had 10 apps for you to explore and learn. But now you have over 200 code samples and SDKs to explore, all open source. Most of these samples already existed, but were scattered around and difficult to find. We just gave them one single place. You can use the type checkbox to filter the results. Along with the sample apps that you're already familiar with, like Apex recipes, automation components, you'll also find sample code for smaller things, like async trigger framework. But that's not all. Sample code isn't just for the core Salesforce platform. You can see samples for all of our different products, including the latest addition, Slack. Stefan just spoke about the new cookie consent library in Lightning Web Components. In Experience Cloud Samples, you'll find the community cookie consent repo, which has the source code for fully functional components that use this library to capture consent. We've also included fun-to-use apps for your virtual events, like GIF Booth, a Kahoot-style multiplayer quiz app, and more. As I mentioned earlier, most of these aren't new. But what's new are the 2 new sample apps we launched, Functions Recipes and AZ Insurance. And as a bonus, I'll also show you an open source app that makes creating Lightning Web Components much faster. First, let's talk about Functions Recipes. Just like the other recipes we have, it's a library of examples to help you get started with Salesforce functions and get used to their main features. You can only deploy this app if you have an org with functions enabled. And functions are scheduled to become generally available in the Winter 22 release. Functions can be created using either Node.js or Java. And in the recipes repo, the main branch has the code for functions created using Node.js. And if you switch the branch to Java functions, you will find the code for functions written using Java. Once you follow the setup instruction and install the app, you can navigate to the functions homepage. From here, you can see the list of functions and the source code for each function. You can switch the language here as well to view the function and related files in Java. In VS Code, all the functions are in the functions directory. Each function is a Node.js project. So if I expand the folder, I can see the different project files. Index.js is the entry point and has the source code for the function. The first recipe is very simple. It just loads a large number of locations from a local file, calculates the distance based on the user's location, and returns the nearest locations. However, if you want to see how to access Salesforce data, you can check out the recipes that start with 03. This function, for example, creates an account, queries it, and returns those details. So first, we define the account object and then use the data API object available through the context parameter and call the create method. The context parameter has the connection between functions and your Salesforce org, so you don't have to worry about authentication and stuff. Similarly, you can use the query method of the data API to query for results. You can test functions locally, but once you deploy them, you can invoke them using Apex. Here is an Apex method that uses the new functions class to first initialize a function and then invoke it. Depending on what annotation you give this method, you can invoke a function from Lwc or flows or any place where Apex can be called from. So back in our app, in the invocation tab, there's a Lightning Web Component which invokes an Apex method and in turn the process large data function you've seen earlier. Once you click the invoke button, you can see the result. Next, let's talk about the other new sample app, that is AZ Insurance. AZ Insurance is a sample app that shows you how you can use Lightning Web Runtime or LWR communities to build customer, partner, and marketing experiences. Once deployed, here is how the community looks. The home page has a navigation menu, a carousel with buttons, and a lot of other static content shown using different layouts. If you click on the Get Insurance button, you'll be taken to a form that stores data in Salesforce objects. Every single aspect of the site, like layouts, navigation, styling, is custom built using Lightning Web Components. We've created a bunch of different reusable web components for each purpose, which of course you can copy and reuse in your own projects. For example, the carousel component uses the Lightning Carousel base component to show an image and a button that you've seen on the homepage. But where are the images, text, and all the static content on the site coming from? Back in the Salesforce org, you can see that we are using Salesforce CMS. And we created a workspace to store all these different types of content. We've even created different custom content types. For example, let's select carousel image. When we create content for this type, we choose what image to show, what's the button label, the URL, and so on. So CMS provides the content and LWC is responsible just for showing the UI. That way, an admin can update the content of the website without writing any code. So how does a component know which content to show? In the community builder, once you add a component, let's say the carousel image component, it prompts you to choose what content has to be shown. Notice that it only shows me the content of type carousel image. How did I define this? I can define this using the meta file of the carousel component. Here, I define the type of property as content reference. And in the filter, I've passed the content type for which the results have to be shown. Once we get the content ID from the builder, we have used connect API methods in Apex to access the content data and show it in the UI. I know this was a very quick overview, but to help you learn more about this app and LWR communities in detail, Renee has made a video series, which you can access from our YouTube channel. One other open source app that we created few months ago that I'm sure all of you will love or already are in love with is the Lwc Builder. Let's say you want to create a web component for a record page. You'll either use the command palette or use the Lightning component create command. This just creates the files you need with basic boilerplate code, but doesn't allow you to configure the meta XML file. You'll have to manually update the targets, target configs, import the API decorator, and so on. Lwc Builder streamlines this process. It is a VS Code extension built using Lightning Web Components that lets you create Lightning Web Components with all the files and metadata configurations in a single step. Once installed on VS Code, all you need to do is open the command palette and select Open Lwc Builder. It has a bunch of different fields you can fill out, like the name, API version, whether or not this component is exposed, and so on. You can then select what files have to be created in the component bundle. Here, I'll select the test file. Now, you can select where this component can be used. That is the targets and target configurations. Let me select app and record pages. You can even choose which form factors the component should be shown in. No more manually going back and forth between the documentation to find and copy paste the exact names and syntax of the targets. Next, you can also decide what public properties you want to create and expose to different targets. At the bottom, you will see a quick preview of how your web component will look like, the files, and the content of the files. Hit create, and your web component with all the necessary configuration is created in an instant. In the JavaScript file, you can see the API decorated property, and in the meta file, you'll see the tags for all the configuration you have chosen. The true spirit of open source is that anyone can contribute to these apps. In fact, we are really happy to see contributions coming in the past few weeks. The Lwc Recipes app is currently a hot favorite. I want to now highlight some of these contributions. We've recently merged a contribution from A. Srinivas that adds Lwc Quick Actions to the recipes. These quick actions are added to the contact detail page. There is a screen action that uses the current record's context and allows you to update a field value. Then there is a headless action that runs a script in the background and shows a toast message once completed. The next contribution came in from Bateman VO, who updated the LMS recipe so that we can subscribe to multiple channels. The trick is to use a map instead of a single property to store multiple subscriptions. The final contribution I want to highlight today is from SGK Mills. Recipes has a reduce errors function that converts different types of error objects into strings. He found that it currently doesn't convert field errors from a UI API DML operation, and he has submitted a fix for it. Thank you for your contributions. Those of you watching us today, make sure you check out our code samples. And we look forward to your contributions as well. And that's pretty much about it. So let me now hand it back to Alba for the Q&A.
Great. So welcome to the Q&A portion of this webinar. We are really excited to hear from you. And we are already seeing good questions. We are receiving great questions already. But if you have a particular question that you want to ask us, you can do that on Twitter. Just remember to mention the Salesforce Devs account and also use the hashtag Salesforce Live. Great, so we are going to get started. Here we have our first question, which is for Sue. Do I need to install the validators as a separate extension in Visual Studio Code? Sue, can you take that one?
Sure, that's a great question. No, it's the validators for mobile are part of the SLDS validator. And when you install the Salesforce extension for VS Code, you get the SLDS validators, which include the mobile validators. And everything that we have for you to get started with those validators, you can find in the LWC Developers Guide. And you can get started on the Mobile Development Center, the LWC for Mobile Development Center on Salesforce Developers.com.
Oh, that's great. So thank you so much for answering that. We have another question here, which says, code samples and SDK. As it is said, all code has already been written. It's just a matter of putting it together in new ways. Great to be able to have access to examples and functions recipes. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much for your feedback. I'm glad that you like the open source app that we have and they are helpful for you. We have another question about Lightning Web Components. This one is for Stefan, I believe, and it's about cookie consent. Do the cookie consent updates also remove cookies when a user opts out?
So the modules allow you to manage consent via a cookie. However, they don't directly remove the cookies when a user accesses the page. What you can do, though, is turn on a setting that lets you manage restricted cookies in the settings of your Experience Cloud site. And then you can use JavaScript to manipulate the cookies on the page. There are loads of examples. It's just plain vanilla JavaScript for managing cookies, and that's enabled by that setting in the Experience Cloud site.
Great, thank you, Stefan. And I think that we have a blog post talking about this topic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Make
available
sure
now on the website.
Yeah, exactly. So make sure to check our blog post, the developer blog post. We have another question in the queue, which is for Aditya, because it's a question about open source applications. Is Lwc Builder available on VS Code Marketplace, Aditya?
Not currently. So what you have to do is just Google for Lwc Builder and you'll find a link for the GitHub repo, which is going to have the VSIX file, which is an installable. You just download that and double click. It's just going to install it on VS Code. But we are, Alba, actually, you were working on Lwc Builder, right? So do you know if we are going to port it on the marketplace?
Yeah, exactly. So I was a collaborator on that project, and we do plan to publish it on the marketplace. Indeed, we are now tackling an update, a big update in which we are going to add some more functionality to the extension, and we plan to publish it under the marketplace for Visual Studio Code so that you can install it easily.
Yeah, so for now, just download it from the GitHub repo. You can just Google for it.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. This time is about Apex. So I think I'm going to be the person who answers this one, which is the ability to call invocable actions from Apex. Is it available in all kinds of organizations? And the answer is not for now. Now, Invocable Actions is a developer preview. As a developer preview, it's only available on Scratchworks. Indeed, it's a feature that you have to activate on purpose, as I showed in the demo, but we will explore new orgs in which we can activate the feature in the next releases. Great. We have another question about mobile. What if my Lightning Web Components use case is not mobile? Will I still get validation warnings?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we get often. At Salesforce, we think that all of the Lightning Web Components should be mobile ready, and that's why we added those validators in. However, if you have a desktop specific use case or a Slack specific use case, and it's not mobile, you can turn off the warnings for one line or for every reference to say that base component that you're using throughout your Lightning Web Components. So there are definitely ways to get rid of those warnings if it's not a mobile use case specifically.
Oh, great. Is that like with a validator that you add in your code, or how do you do that?
Yeah, it's the same as if you're familiar with the linting rules. It's that we use the same method to be able to turn off the validators, and we provide the description of how to do that in the Lwc Developers Guide.
Okay, thank you so much. Great. So we have another question about cookie consent. Stefan, do the cookie consent modules work in Lightning Experience?
They don't actually. The cookie consent modules are made only to run in Experience Cloud, because you're setting those preferences based on the Experience Cloud site. The way that cookies are managed on actual core Salesforce and Lightning experience is totally different, but that's because we're working with end users there. Whereas in Experience Cloud, you need to be able to have fine-grained control over those cookies for your customers who may be accessing the site.
Great. Thank you so much for responding that question, Stefan. We have here another question. This time is about open source apps again. So Aditya, you may be the person who takes this one. Yeah. Is there a way to filter the code samples to show only the apps from the old sample gallery?
It's an excellent question. Currently, no. If you remember the names of the apps, you can search for them, or you'll find all of those details on Trailhead. Actually, we have like a trail that has a list of all the previous sample apps that we had. So yeah, we know that it is a limitation. Even I find it a little bit difficult sometimes to search through it. So we are actively working on making sure we make those sample apps more discoverable, maybe by means of a new checkbox in the dropdown or some other way. We don't know how, but we are definitely looking to solve that problem.
Yeah, great. So I know that there are a lot of improvements coming in the next releases of the developer side, right? And that will...
Oh, yeah. And anything you want to be added to the developer website, literally on every page, there is a feedback button. So you click on it, let us know what you think, and we'll add it for you.
Great, amazing. Thank you so much for that response. So we have another question for Mobile SDK. Is Mobile SDK 9.1 already available?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, Mobile SDK recently released a 9.1 version. So everything that I mentioned today about multiple windows and support for Mac, you can grab that today by downloading the Mobile SDK. And again, you can find out the link to do that just by going to the Mobile SDK Development Center on developer.salesforce.com.
Amazing, thank you, Sue. And here we have another question also about Mobile SDK, indeed, which says, can I use Lightning Web Components in Mobile SDK apps today?
Yeah, we get that question a lot with the power of Lightning. People want to be able to use them in their custom mobile apps. And so in our 8.2 release, we added support for Lightning Web Components. And it allows you just to take your existing Lightning Web Component and embed it within your mobile SDK app. Our goal for the future is to provide a much tighter integration with Lightning, which is coming with our Lightning SDK, to be able to take those Lightning Web Components and use them in offline or scenarios with no network connectivity, which isn't as easy to do today with our current setup.
Amazing, thank you. Here we have another question, which is about functions, which is, are functions already GA? Who wants to take this one?
Yeah, I can go ahead and take that one. We definitely have a lot of exciting content and announcements to make about functions at Dreamforce, so be sure to check it out. But currently, functions are slated to be generally available in winter 22. So very, very soon.
We are very excited with functions, everyone. Okay, so continuing with the topic of functions, I'm seeing here another question about Apex function mocks. The question says, can I use Apex function mocks without access to functions at all? And I can take that one because I built the demo for Apex. So basically, you need to have your function deployed in your environment, because you need to be able to invoke the function in your code, in your test code. The only difference is that the invocation of the function is not going to be real. It's going to be a mocked response, right? But the function needs to be there, right? It's not something that you can mock completely and just remove the function from your organization. But that makes sense, right? Because we want to have the real thing and be able to test it, emulating what the function does. And I hope that you like this feature, because I personally enjoyed very much building the demo for Apex function testing. Great. So we have another question about open source apps. Are there any guidelines or prerequisites for us to contribute to the sample apps, Aditya?
Okay, so before I answer that question, again, a huge thank you to all the contributors. Really, in the past 1 month, all I've been doing is merging PRs from all the different contributors. So when you talk about contributing, every app that we have has a file called contributing.md. So that file has all the instructions that tell you how you'll have, what is the process involved in you submitting a new contribution to us. It's actually very simple. Just because it's a file, don't worry that it is too long. All it gives you is instructions around how you'll have to name your commits, how you'll have to name the PR, what is the process to raise the PR, how we review it and stuff like that. So check it out. There are the code samples and SDKs now has like a ton of repos. Each have its own contributing guidelines. So check out the contributing.md document.
Mm-hmm. I think, Aditya, correct me if I'm wrong, that one of the requirements is that you sign an agreement, right? The CLI agreement.
Yes,
then,
the moment you raise a PR, it's going to tell you, in case you haven't signed a CLA agreement with us, it's going to prompt it. It's going to also add a flag to the PR saying CLA missing. So unless you sign the CLA, we cannot move ahead with that PR. Don't worry, all of these are simple steps, just a matter of clicking 2-3 buttons.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I would like to recommend also the audience to open issues in the apps. If you have an idea of a feature that could be implemented and you cannot implement it yourself, you can open an issue and we can take a look, and maybe if it's something interesting that is going to help the community, we can spend time in building it.
Oh, yes.
Great. So here we have another question for Lightning Web Components, which is, will the developer console ever be able to edit Lightning Web Components? Do you want to take that one, Stefan?
Yeah, of course. So there are currently no plans to enable Lightning Web Components in the developer console. However, you may have heard of Code Builder in the past. Keep your ears peeled for some announcements at Dreamforce and some great demos of that tool, which will then introduce the ability to edit and update Lightning Web Components in a browser-based IDE.
Yeah, super excited to have Code Builder in our hands, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So we have another question about functions. Which languages will you be able to use when functions become GA? I can take that one if no one wants. So basically in this GA release, what we are going to add is the ability to work with Java. So we are going to have the JavaScript Node.js part that we have demoed in the past, and we are adding the ability to work with Java for this release. In the future, we will extend the feature or the technology to be able to work with other programming languages as well.
Yeah, just to add to that, again, a quick recap. You would have already seen it in my demo, but the functions recipes also includes functions for both these languages, Node.js and Java. So check them out.
Yeah, and by the way, the function recipes also contains examples of how to test Salesforce functions. So take a look when you can. Great, we have another question about mobile. How do I get my existing mobile SDK apps to run on Mac?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we recently released a blog for that, which you can find at the Mobile Development Center. But the way that you do that is, you can take the samples that we have and just copy certain code into your existing apps to make it to work. The Mobile SDK itself, if you upgrade to 9.1, the framework itself has been updated. And just by doing that, we enable your app to be able to run on an M1 Mac. And then if you want to use specific things like offline or other features of the Mobile SDK on Mac, you may need to make some tweaks to the code. And our blog that we have on the Development Center describes, the little things that you need to do. But for the most part, we try to make it as simple as possible.
Oh, great. Thank you, Sue. We have here another question about mobile SDK, so I'm going to continue with that one, which says, I heard a lot of iOS development for mobile SDK. What about Android and cross-platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. In my presentation, I talked a lot about the new features for multiple Windows and for Mac, and that's iOS focused. But the mobile SDK has many flavors for many types of development. We support native Android. We have React Native flavors. You can also do hybrid with Cordova for mobile SDK. So it's not just the mobile SDK for iOS, but we have a lot of flexibility for you to develop custom apps tailored to your specific business needs.
Okay, thank you so much for responding that one. Let me see, we have here another question about LWC, which says, any new feature improvements in the roadmap for LWC local development?
Yep, so currently it's still in beta, and that is the current plan as we are going forward. However, we may see it leave that beta at some point in the future as we improve the technology that surrounds that.
Great. So let's stay tuned also to know more about LWC local development. We have another question about an issue with LWR communities. I am facing an issue in deploying LWR communities to a scratcher. It throws an error ID. This one
I can take that.
Okay.
Okay, so even I face this issue. So here is the thing. Okay, there is currently an issue where you cannot deploy the entire bundle. So let's say you have some classes, web components, and then your experience bundle as well. So in a single deployment, there is an issue which prevents you from deploying all the bundle together. So there is a workaround for that. So the first thing you'll have to do is, once you create a Scratch org, you'll have to first create like a dummy community, maybe use the Aloha template or something, just to create a community so that all the necessary metadata files are created for that. And then what you have to do is split your deployment into two. So first deploy all of your Lightning Web Components classes, everything that is not related to the community. So for example, your networks and the experience bundle metadata file. So all of those deployed separately. Deploy your classes, pages, web components, profiles separately. So once you do that, the deployment goes through. I know it's a multi-step process for now, but we are working on resolving that issue. And if you have any questions on how you want to split things, the AZ insurance sample app that I showed you, if you look at the README file, it has the code snippets, or rather SFDX commands that show you how we have split the deployment into two. So check out the README file of the AZ insurance sample app, and following those exact steps for your repo will solve that issue for you.
Mm-hmm. Great workaround. Thank you, Aditya, for sharing that. I'm sure that's going to help a lot of people.
Oh, yes.
Great. So I'm seeing here some questions regarding invocable actions. So I'm going to take those ones. First of all, where can I find the available invocable actions? So basically, there are two kinds of invocable actions. There are the standard actions that are available in the organization for you. And if you want to know the name of a particular invocable action, the best way to do it is to go to the Actions Developer Guide. That's an independent developer guide just for actions. And there you will find the list of all available invocable actions. For instance, the chatter post invocable actions that we used in our demo. Then the second kind of invocable actions are custom invocable actions. Those are defined by you in Apex. So the way to refer to them, to reference them in your code, is just using the name of the class in which the invocable action has been defined. So really easy. And then we have another question that says, when to use invocable actions versus Apex REST? So basically, before, as we didn't have this feature of invoking invocable actions directly in Apex, we had to implement a workaround, which was to, from Apex, call the invocable action through the REST API. But that code is not going to be needed anymore because now we have like a direct way to invoke the actions. So what I recommend you to use is the new way. If you can, remember that now it's in developer preview, but you can already test it and start playing with that. And use that method always, right? Because it's going to be like a more streamlined way and simpler way to invoke the action, and it's going to require less lines of code, and you will be able to reuse that method from different entry points. So I recommend you to do that. Great. So we have another question for mobile. With mobile web, I was able to use Chrome developer tools to debug my Lightning Web Components for mobile. How do I do this now?
Yeah, we get that question a lot because, you know, with mobile web, it was very easy to use the browser and just have the Chrome dev tools resize your browser to be a mobile specific shape, you know, but our guidance now is to use the Salesforce mobile app or the Salesforce based mobile apps for mobile. And what we do is we provide emulators for the Salesforce mobile app. And with those emulators, you can still hook up, you know, Chrome dev tools or Safari dev tools to them and get that same debugging details you got by doing it through the browser. And, you know, we have a lot of information in the developer's guide for how to do that, but it's just as simple and you get the exact same information that you did before, which is really great.
Great, great. Good to know that. Thank you, Sue. Okay, so some more questions coming in regarding Lightning Web Components. Can we access custom metadata types with Lightning Web Components?
Yeah, totally. You can access them through Apex in quite a few ways. You could use, or you can use get record as well in Lightning Data Services to get the custom metadata types. You can query them just like standard objects in most cases, and it's really simple to bring them into your components.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. And here I'm seeing also a very popular question in regards to Lightning Web Components, which is when can we expect Lightning Web Components to render as PDF? Yes,
so generally our guidance at the moment is to look towards functions for something like that, because we need that high compute power to be able to generate the documents. Wiring up a function to a Lightning Web Component is super easy. There's even a generic invoker for Lightning Web Components in the functions recipes app that Aditya was showing earlier. So it's something that will be totally achievable very soon through functions.
Good to know. Thank you so much. That's going to be super helpful as well. Okay, so we have another question about open source apps. It says the CI is failing when I submit a pull request to the sample apps with some error about secrets. What can I do?
Okay, so what happens is the way we've built our CI is that every time you submit a new pull request, we actually deploy all of the source code to a brand new Scratch org, just to make sure the deployment goes through and everything is working good. Now, to create that Scratch org using GitHub Actions, we need to supply it with some secrets where we supply it with an SFDX URL to authenticate a dev hub and subsequently create a Scratch org and stuff. A lot goes on. So what happens is GitHub recently released an update where the secrets are not made available to workflows whenever it's created on a fork. And typically when you contribute to us, you actually create a fork of our repo and submit a PR on the fork. So whenever that happens, GitHub itself is not giving access to those secrets to your fork, which is why the CI fails. But nothing to worry. We are there. So we manually deploy all of your code to a Scratch org locally to see if everything is working good. And we are going to manually merge all of your changes. So just because the CI is failing with the secrets error doesn't mean you've done something wrong. We will definitely reach out to you with more details on the PR using comments.
Great. Thank you, Adita, for taking that one. Okay, so here we have another question about one of the Apex features that we demoed today, which is enum value of. And the question is, what happens with enum value of if there is no match for the string? So what's going to happen in that case is that we are going to throw an exception. I think the name of the section is like no such element exception. And that way you are going to make sure that the string that you are trying to convert to the enum value is something valid and defined in the possible values for your enums. So you have to take that into account when using this method. We have another question about mobile, which is how do I get started with mobile tools for LWC?
Yeah, whether, if you're already building LWCs in VS Code, you can just jump in and our validators will help guide you. But if you want to use the emulator builds or you want to find out more about building mobile ready components, the best place to start in LW, you helped us create that wonderful development center for the LWC for mobile, but for both Mobile SDK and for Lightning Web Components for mobile, you can go directly to the development centers. And there we have, everything you need to know to get started. We have videos to walk you through getting the simulators up and running, and just all the latest information that would be useful and pointers to the developer's guide. So that's the best place to get started.
Okay, thank you. We have another question in the chat, which is, can you please re-explain the data with part? But I'm not sure that what that question is referring to, because I think we didn't mention data within any of the sessions. Not sure if the rest of the panelists know. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to ask the person who asked the question to explain what you are referring to, and that way we can maybe respond you. Thank you for doing that. Great. So we don't have many more questions coming in. I invite you to add more questions here. Remember that you can ask us on Twitter on our Salesforce Developers account, and also using the hashtag Salesforce Live. By the way, if you have more questions later after this live session, we will keep responding your questions. We are constantly monitoring the Trailblazer community. There is a Trailblazer community group which is for Salesforce developers, and all my team is constantly taking a look at the group to try to answer all your questions. And also on Twitter, if you mention the Salesforce developer account, that's perfectly fine. Okay, as I'm not seeing more questions, I'm going to start wrapping up. There is something else that I want to tell everyone, which is if you want to know more about Winter 22 features, please make sure to go to sforce.co/learn more, because there you are going to find 5 amazing blog posts that highlight and deep dive all the amazing developer features that we have presented today. In the link, you are going to find also a trail mix. And if you complete the trail mix by October 31st, you will enter a raffle to win a certification voucher. I also want to thank you all the panelists that we have had today. Thank you, all of you, Stefan, Sue, Aditya, for answering all those great questions coming from the audience. Thank you so much, the audience, for being connected. And remember, we will keep responding questions, keep them coming. And that's all from me. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day, and goodbye.